Hello, everyone around the world. Welcome. Bienvenidos, que calos irfete, to Coloring My Way Across the Globe. I'm your host, Lauren Battistini, color consultant, artist, language learner, and world traveler. Join me each week as I chronicle the most colorful people, places, and experiences I encounter off the beaten path, both near and far. So, let's go. Vámonos, que pame. Welcome, friends and colleagues from around the globe. Welcome to my debut episode of the podcast Coloring My Way Across the Globe. I'm Lauren Battistini, and for this very special episode, I have flown to Tucson, Arizona to meet with a very special mentor, colleague, friend, confidant, and someone whose name is synonymous with color. She has worked in the color industry for decades now and has had an illustrious career, has worked across multiple industries, specifying color, forecasting color. And so who better to interview for my debut podcast than the world's foremost authority, advisor, and expert in the color industry, my friend, the inimitable, colorful, effervescent, world-traveled Leatrice Eiseman. Lee, welcome to the podcast.
It's my pleasure, Lauren.
And thank you for having me in your beautiful home studio. Of course, it's filled with color. And I'm very happy to talk to you today and have you be my first guest for the podcast. And this podcast, as we discussed, you and I did earlier, it's really about chronicling the most colorful people, places, and experiences I have encountered across the globe, near and far. And so you came to mind as my first guest, and I really appreciate your being here with me. And so the first question I have for you, and I know a lot of people want to know this, is walk us through a day in the life of a color professional.
Well, walking through a day in the life of a color professional means a different walk every day.
Or a run.
Yes, or a run, many times a run. There is no one typical day. What I have found in my practice was that, and continues to be, the new challenges that enter the scene. I mean, I don't know what tomorrow may bring, and that I don't know who my next client is going to be necessarily. We get calls, we get emails, we get texts from various people who want our services. And we never know really exactly what that's going to entail until we get into more detail. So it's a constant challenge every day. I mean, one day I might be doing some work for a cosmetic company. Another day, I might be doing something very mundane in the way of housewares equipment that's very different than cosmetics. So our professional life is really very eclectic and very versatile. And I think that's one of the things that's always fascinated me. Rather than having a typical day every day, I don't know what the next day is going to bring. And then, of course, we have to address doing that project. So that takes up time. In addition to that, there are so many facets to my career. As you know, I've written 10 books.
Yes,
and
I have some of them in my library, in my color library.
Well, that's good to know. And I am talking to someone about doing number 11. I can't believe I'm going to be doing that, but I am. And this one's very exciting, but I can't talk about it yet because it hasn't formalized, but we're talking. In any event, the research that goes into all of those books, the research that goes into what I need to know in order to fulfill my obligation in helping companies choose colors for their products or interiors or wherever it's necessary. Research is a big deal. It takes a lot of time, a lot of trouble, but at the same time, there are so many areas that go into the research. Yeah. Travel, of course. And travel, even though it was curtailed during COVID, it's picking up again. And there, of course, is so much to learn online. And we are constantly getting gorgeous imagery from people who want to share their work with us, whether they be artists or designers, whoever the people might be. Get a lot of questions from people about color. And of course, my favorite thing always to share is if I get on a plane, and the person sitting next to me engages me in conversation. It can be the CEO of a big company, or a woman who simply wants to know an answer because she's redecorating her home, or a guy. And the question eventually arrives at, what color should I paint my living room walls?
Well,
And that's become sort of a joke,
Yes.
that no matter who the person is and how extensive the product is going to be in the marketplace, when it gets down to it, it becomes very personal. What color should I paint my living room walls?
Yes. Well, and you know that I'm an architectural color consultant currently, so I work on these residential and commercial projects. So in the residential world, it is very personalized, and people have certain inclinations about color preferences, and then we have to work with their existing materials and finishes in the home to create a paint color palette that really coordinates properly and pulls a whole look together, harmonizes with everything else in the space. But I have a question for you for clarification for my listeners, because what you do in the field of color is, it could be very specialized. It also can be very broad. So talk to us, please, about the things that you could do for a company. I've even heard you say that you were working on a renaming of some colors project, or you've been developing the color palette for packaging, rebranding of logos, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very extensive. And yes, I just finished adding some names onto the Pantone color gamut. They not probably, but definitely have been my biggest client for many years because I'm the executive director of the Pantone Color Institute. But in addition to that, I am one of their go-to people as far as information, quantification, anything that they might need that needs my expert help. So that's my biggest client. But I have served clients in every imaginable industry. And one of my favorite stories is a company that came to me through an industrial design firm. And this big company, very big company, was in the area of doing computers. And someone on their staff had said, well, maybe we should be thinking about color. And so they went to this industrial design company, and the industrial design company said, we need to call in a big name in color because we're working with engineers in the computer industry. They're not going to be particularly on board for seeing color. So we need to have somebody who's got some, qualifying experience. So they came to me. And for me, I thought this is fantastic because at the time there wasn't a lot of color in computers. And this was in the 90s.
I feel like everything was just silver.
Gray. And putty. Putty is an important word.
Okay. And black.
And that was it.
Just neutrals.
Yeah. Now, and then, of course, when Apple entered the scene, that changed. But this was just before Apple did their iMacs in color. And so I went to the drawing board and I came with the color that I thought was absolutely perfect for people to have in their offices, whether it be in the home or an office. And what I had to consider was, first of all, competition. At that time, no competition was doing color in the computer world. So I knew that they'd be number one on the block. And I thought that was a big deal, the attention that it would earn them. Then I had to look at it from the standpoint of there's both men and women in those offices and in those homes. So it had to be not a gender-specific color, had to be something that would be more appealing. What are some of the popular colors? And what nuance of that color? That's important. We can arrive at a color family. What we have to know, does it need to be grayed down? Does it need to be a little brighter? Does it need to be soft? What is the idea we're trying to get across with that product? And so the psychology of color, the emotion of color enters into it. And that, of course, is my specialty. So I have to evaluate what color works best in that area. Yeah. There are so many considerations. And also, there is the world of trends. Although computers weren't so much affected by that, this was going to start a new trend. So I had to choose a color that I knew that people would understand. It wouldn't be too confusing. It wouldn't be offensive. There was a lot of consideration that went into it. So I came up with the color and I gave it to the industrial design firm. They gave it to the manufacturer. And it took them 6 months to make up their mind.
6 months?
6 months to make up their mind whether they were going to go with this particular first color. In the meantime, I did a talk for the Industrial Design Society in San Jose, California. And there was a group of young people that came in, joined at the hip. They all sat down together, and they were riveted by what I had to say, gave me a lot of attention in talking about color psychology, color trends, and they were giving each other the high sign and thumbs up all during my talk. And
it really resonated with them.
Yes, it did. It did. And at the end of my talk, I always ask for Q&A. And one of the people in this group said, if you were going to choose a color for a computer, what color would you choose? Well, I should add that the other company had finally reached a decision and turned it down.
Oh, they did turn it down.
Oh, yes, they turned it down. They said, the world isn't ready for a color computer. We're not ready to be number one because we don't know if we, that's a good idea. We're a very staid company. And they turned it down. And I thought, this is an idea that is so ready. The world is so ready for color in computers. So, having told you that, one of the people in this group raised their hand and asked this question about what color would I make a computer? And I thought, well, I just did it. It was turned down, released from obligation, and I came up with a color. And again, they all kind of looked around at each other. And I found out later that that was the Apple group that had come in to hear me.
Okay.
And it was Hewlett-Packard who had turned me down
Oh,
through
my
the
goodness.
industrial design firm. Well, do I have to tell you the end of the story? Within the next year, the iMac came out, and the number one color that they came up with was blueberry, which was the color that I talked about. It was a variation of that shade in the teal family. Now, I am not taking credit for that number one color. The design team at Apple has always been fabulous. First with Jonathan Ives, and now other things that they're doing.
Sure.
They were the leaders in the field. I give them absolute credit. They didn't have to come to me because they had a working group.
Right.
But perhaps what I had to say kind of identified the direction they were going in. Maybe they were already in that direction. Again, I can't take credit.
Could have reinforced the direction they were going.
Exactly. Now, I did something that day that I have never done again. It was so clear in my mind, it had been rejected, and it just, top of mind, it just came out. But then I thought afterwards, that's really not a good idea, because I don't have enough information. I had the information that Hewlett-Packard gave me, and you make the assumption that Apple was going for the same targeted consumer. That's a very important thing to consider. But at the same time, if somebody in the audience asked me what color I would make a particular product, I always say to them, and it's not avoidance, but it's because I need to collect this information. I need to know who their competition is. I need to know who their target audience is. I need to know what price point it's going to be. I need to know what kind of outlet it's going to be sold in. I mean, there's so many questions you have to ask before you make a decision about the color of a product or an environment.
Yes.
So when I do talks now, presentations, if people ask that question, I will say to them, come up and talk to me afterwards. And it's not, I can't give them it off the top of my head. It should never be, use blue because blue would be perfect. I don't have enough information.
That's correct. And I first met you, Lee, when I flew up to Washington State, where you were giving one of your famous courses, and it was an introduction to color, but also it had to do with the psychology of color, as well as all the other ramifications, the business aspect of color, the creative artistic side of color. And so to your point, and we learned this in the 4-day workshop with you, you have got to, before you make these declarations and you specify a particular color, you must consider all of the variables, target audience, people's attitudes about color. And again, a lot of trend research is involved. And you can't just willy-nilly come up with a color off the top of your head. Yes, you can. However, you're not armed with all of the details and all of the variables and all of the facts that you would need to make an informed color choice.
Exactly.
And the business of color is big business, as you well know, and you've worked with some of the world's top corporations, and you're not even able to discuss some of these projects because they're so highly guarded because they provide a competitive advantage to companies, and you have even had to sign non-disclosure agreements routinely. So you've got projects running right now we can't even talk about.
Exactly.
I wish we could. And I'm not even going to try to ask you about the 2024 Pantone Color of the Year, which you know what it is, and you all are about to release it in a couple of weeks, but you won't tell me what it is, and that's okay. We're going to pivot over to a different...
And my lips are sealed.
You're listening to Coloring My Way Across the Globe with Lauren Battistini. For more information, check out lfbcolor.com.
I know they're sealed, and I remember when I took your course years ago, it was around the time in which I think you all were about to make an announcement, and you wouldn't tell our class either. We flew that whole way to see you, and you still wouldn't see us.
Yeah.
So I do want today to be a very colorful conversation, obviously, but not only about the business of color, but about your travels. A lot of my listeners enjoy that I talk about travel. I travel all over the place. I learn languages, and I'm always fascinated by the people I meet, the architecture I see, and just culture, customs, and how color kind of ties into all of that. So my question for you is, having done all the travel that you've done, what are some of the most colorful places you've visited around the world?
Well, as far as the most colorful places, for me, it's always an exercise when I travel in finding out what is indigenous in that culture, what the scenery around that particular country is, what do people live with from a day-to-day basis? Do they look out of their windows and see the mountains? Do they see snow? What is it they see that enters their environment? But I have to say that today it's broadened even beyond where they are geographically, because everybody has access to our phones, our computers. Years ago, people did not. I mean, if they couldn't afford magazines that came from other areas of the country, they lived in one city in one state. If they didn't travel, they were only surrounded by the colors that were within their scope.
Yes.
Today, you have a whole world out there. And even though, I live in Tucson, obviously a lot of people here use the indigenous culture colors, the colors of gorgeous sunsets, the desert colors,
yes.
the cacti, the succulent, a lot of the Native American heritage influences here, and that's to be expected. And a lot of them have moved from other areas, or they're snowbirds.
Yes.
And so they love the idea of coming here and adapting the colors that they see around them. At the same time, there's a comfort level that every person has. And if someone was raised in the Northeast, let's say, and they're more accustomed to traditional kinds of decor, more traditional colors, they may adapt some of the new colors from Tucson and want their Tucson home to look very Southwesty.
Yes.
But at the same time, there might be something within their brain, within their psyche, within their memory bank that just gets comfort by having a piece of furniture that belonged to grandma, or a painting on the wall that reminds them of where they were born or their happy childhood. So my point being that it's not all about just where you're living now, but it's also about where you have lived, what brought you comfort, what continues to bring you comfort. And so I always question people. My daughter in particular does a lot of the architectural work, my daughter Leatrice, and she will ask them the same questions. Where are you from? What are your memories of color? What are your happiest colors? I mean, you need to ask people those questions because it goes very much into the colors that give them comfort. And I will say to you, one of the things that I hate to hear is when you work with a client, my daughter works with a client, and they say that they had used an interior designer, and I'm all for interior designers. I think many of them are very skilled as far as color is concerned. However, many times you will hear they said, oh, no, you need to get rid of that. It's too old, too yesterday. That color is over. That really bothers me because you need to work within the realm of what is comfortable to that particular person.
I see this as an architectural color consultant when I work with my clients in the residential spaces in particular. They have attachments to certain colors. There are certain colors they've always loved for whatever reason. Those colors do need to be incorporated. I do agree with you on this.
Absolutely. So, in answer to your original question, any place that I travel, I always try to get a sense of what is surrounding these people. But you do have to look at it from the standpoint, I've spent a lot of time in Seoul, Korea, and I had a client there who kept me coming back every year until they decided to retire. And I have gone back even since then because I've made friends there. And I love going to Seoul. It's a fabulous city. But what astonishes me all the time is you walk down the street there and you look at the store windows and you see the same merchandise that you see in San Francisco, in Chicago. I mean, it's everything has become such a cultural mix. And a lot of it is dependent on the age of the people who are doing the shopping. If it's young people, you find they want to look like young people that live within other cultures, not just their own.
Yes.
Now, if you travel to the hinterlands, if you go outside of the big city, still there are people with computers and smartphones, but for the most part, they might be a little more steeped in the traditions of the country. And so you're going to please them a bit more if you use colors that work for them. Giant Bikes was one of my big clients in Taiwan. And I mean, these people were just so into what the westernized world was doing because they sell their bikes in the US as well as any place else in the world. So one of my jobs was to help them ascertain what colors work best from a very modern standpoint. And they continue to do a fabulous job.
That's good. That's a different answer than I expected. I kind of almost been you've been to so many places around the world. I think I expected you to say, "Oh, well, the colors in Tuscany are so magnificent," and I'm sure that they are. Yes, but I understand what you're saying. Is it just depends on so many factors.
Yes, it does.
Whether or not colors are again indigenous to that region. I know that when I travel, I really enjoy looking at architecture and seeing how color is utilized. I'll tell you something that I found interesting. My son and I went to Japan back in May. We were there for 2 weeks. And very interestingly to me was from a wardrobing perspective, the Japanese, they're very smart dressers. Their color palette is very neutral. However, they use lots of bold, vibrant color in a lot of their product packaging and advertising and billboards and even buildings and architecture. So it's just this contrast that I really noticed when I was there. I see that as well.
Absolutely. And Japan is a good example of that. Walking down the major streets and seeing, if you're out in the evening, especially after dark, and the lights are blazing, I mean, you are affected by that.
Most definitely.
Yep.
Okay, well, talking about personal wardrobing for just a moment and in the context of travel. I know you travel so much, I do too. I kind of have my go-to wardrobe. Talk to me about your go-to travel wardrobe or just maybe some travel essentials for those of my listeners who are about to embark on some journeys themselves.
Okay, well, I'm going to start first with food because when you travel, that's a big deal. I am very much into a more modernized way of eating, as you well know, Lauren.
Yes.
I'm not a vegan, but I'm almost there. Plant-based foods are important to me, and I have learned through my years of travel that you can wind up in a place where maybe the water is a little questionable.
Yes.
What they wash the salad greens in is water, so you've got to be really, really cautious of that. So I always travel with some form of fruit and protein. I mean, fruits you can usually get wherever you're traveling, and sometimes you have problems getting back into the country with produce. But nuts and seeds and things that are chewy, that give you some vitality, and you brought from home, so it's not questionable, you can eat it. Even a little bit of peanut butter, I travel with that.
Okay.
I mean, you really have to be very thoughtful about that because the last thing you want to do is to get sick when you're on a trip.
That's right.
And then mess up the time that you're there or come home from a trip and be sick. All right, that's a very, very practical. So food is the first thing I consider.
Thank you.
Yeah. Secondly, you've got to think, at least I do, and I'm sure everybody wants to take pictures. You've got to think about how you're going to power up Do you have the right currency, the right current for your equipment that you're taking with you?
Yes.
Now, a lot of the big hotels have all of that to offer you, unless all of their equipment is handed out to some of their other people that are staying at the hotel. That's happened too. So you need to travel with your own electronics and take it with you on the plane because, again, lost luggage
is a reality for some.
Absolutely a reality. And I have a funny story to tell about lost luggage, and I'll share that with you in just a moment. As far as wardrobe is concerned, the neck piece, because we all know what it's like to fall asleep and have a kink in your neck when you wake up because your head's rolled over. That's a very practical lesson. And taking something that is plushy and warm, even if you're going to southern climates and heat, we know what the planes can be like. And that makes you miserable if you're too cold on a plane. So I have my favorite fleece jackets that I take. And I will make it a part of my travel wardrobe. I will actually wear it on the plane.
Yes.
Take it off if it's too hot, something cushy, easy, and you can use it as a blanket at night if you're in an over air conditioned hotel room. So it serves that purpose
Very
as
practical.
well. And then, even though I am a color consultant and I started out in the field of fashion, and there are some people who say there's some who should not wear black, I don't believe that. I think everyone can use black because we don't wear black head to toe. We break up the black. We put a necklace around it. We put a scarf around the neck. We put on a little more blush. But from a standpoint of travel, you absolutely can't beat black. And it's always going to be fashionable, no matter where you are in the world and you're going someplace special and you think, oh my gosh, I didn't bring something to wear. If you've got black, you can always dress it up.
You can zazz it up.
Or dress it down, whichever way.
Yes.
So I think that's important. And I think the accessories are major because we all know what it's like not to have to take too much in your suitcase and have, at least have some changes and have a couple of dressy things, a little bit of sparkle to add to the outfit in case you have that unexpected place to go and you don't have to worry about it. Comfortable shoes, oh my goodness, absolutely, absolutely necessary.
I have learned that the hard way. I have. So you have a funny story about lost luggage, and let me tell you, I want to hear this story, but this is why this is why I try to pack as much as I can on a carry-on. I have been to Europe several times for 2 to 3 weeks at a time, only with a carry-on piece of luggage because I'm worried about lost luggage. I hear Maxie, your little buddy, your dog Maxie in the background. Is it okay if I bring him in?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Because, I want him here with us. It's fine. You go ahead and tell the story about the lost luggage.
Okay. My story about lost luggage is one that I like to share because it was a time that I probably should have known better. We all have those days. Why didn't I think about that? I was coming back from Milan. And of course, Milan is a wonderful place to shop for clothing, for jewelry. I mean, anything you want.
So I've heard. I've not been yet.
Oh my gosh. And I love Milan. I love the city. I love the design area. I stay in the middle of the design area when I'm there. And I was going on to Los Angeles to visit my daughter who was living in LA at the time. I had moved from LA up north. And we were going to stop on the way home for a very special family occasion. And I had my carry-on, with my good jewelry and all those important things, your cosmetics, whatever else you need that you ordinarily take with you if you have medication or vitamins, whatever. But I couldn't possibly take it all on the plane because I had picked up so many goodies in Milan. And I thought, Milan to Los Angeles. No stopovers anywhere, just straight. I'm home free. I'll be fine. Well, of course, it didn't work out that way. I sent all of these fantastic presents that I had gotten while I was in Milan. I mean, I had all of my shopping finished, all in the suitcase, except for the things that I mentioned. I got to Los Angeles, and my luggage wasn't there. And just my suitcase. And it was a brand new suitcase. And of course, what I had failed to remember was I had lived in LA and I should have known better. The conveyor belts were right next to the street. So anybody could have come in and just pick up your suitcase and walk off. But you know, you're trusting and you think it's a big airline, it's going to be fine. I got a call when I got to the hotel. I went to the airline and I, filled out the forms. And they said, "Oh, madam, not a problem. We'll have it for you. We'll go on our computer, figure out where it is." I got to the hotel, waited. No call from the airline. Called them. "Oh, madam, we're still checking it out. Have no fear. It'll be there in the morning."
You are listening to Coloring My Way Across the Globe. Stories of the most colorful people, places, and experiences off the beaten path, both near and far, as hosted by myself, Lauren Battistini. Each week, I'll be interviewing color professionals, artists, world travelers, language learning experts, digital nomads, other entrepreneurs, creative professionals, visionaries. There's something here for everyone interested in the world around them. Keep listening, there's more to follow.
This is in the evening, in the morning. In the morning, of course, it wasn't there. I had to call back to the airline. He said, "Oh, we're still working on it. We're still tracing it." Then I got a call back, and it's a man with an accent of some kind. And he said, "Madam, we're looking all through the airport for you." And I said, "You have a very interesting accent. Are you in Los Angeles? Are you in Milan? It's not an accent I recognize." And he paused. He didn't say anything. And I asked the question again. I said, "Where are you based?" He said, "I'm in India, madam." He was in India with a crew going through both airports looking for my luggage. I thought that is a convenient excuse for the airline. I had whatever I had on. I had on black, and I had 2 scarves with me. Thank goodness for that. I had to go to this big occasion with, of course, I put on some sparkly jewelry, and I wore one of the scarves, the same black outfit that I had worn. I had no time to shop. That was out of the question for this occasion. And the next day came, still no, this is number 2 day, still getting the same nonsense from the airline. Number 3 day. And I said to my husband, I said, "I am so sick of wearing the same outfit for 3 days and having every day jam-packed that I can't shop for anything. I think maybe I'm going to wear your clothes on the 3rd day and you can wear mine." At least there'll be some change. He had on black slacks and a black top.
You would have had a different silhouette to wear that day,
Exactly.
and lots of questions.
Exactly. So the point of the whole story is that the travel issue has gotten complicated because the way that you travel is definitely better, no question. And I have learned since then to take even an extra pair of black whatever with me, so you have something to change in.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree with you about utilizing black as your base, as your staple neutral. And because people know I'm a color consultant, anywhere I go, I feel the need to infuse some type of color into my wardrobe.
Absolutely.
Be it lipstick, blush,
Yes.
bright earrings. But what I like to do is, as my neutrals, I use black, denim always, and white typically. And then I have different colored tops, sweaters, blazers, and scarves.
Absolutely.
Pops of color.
Yeah.
I do a lot of that color blocking, and boom, it's easy for me. And I find that that's what enables me to econo-pack.
Absolutely.
And take a 2 to 3 week trip to Europe with just carry-on.
Oh, absolutely.
Piece of luggage.
Yes.
So,
and if you're taking that 3-week trip and you know exactly what you're going to be doing when you're there, or at least maybe somebody's going to be dressier. And remember that I always have the color of the year, usually in my eyeglasses. So,
I do remember this about you. Every time I've seen you, or you've been sporting that color of the year because you work hard. You're the executive director of the Pantone Color Institute, which I know everyone here already knew that unless they were living under a rock. So you're instrumental in this process from start to finish, and so this is part of your representation of that.
Absolutely.
Brand representation.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about 2024 for a moment and projects that you feel that you can discuss, things that are coming down the pipeline, that you're excited about, and ways that people could also receive color education from you. I'm curious to know what you have in the works.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the works, of course, I can't talk about them because I have to sign non-disclosure.
I know.
So I can't necessarily go there. I mean, I know I'm going to have certain things that will come up for Pantone, which are the forecasts. I work on that every year. I do a home forecast, home and fashion forecast for Pantone. I do 2 different forecasts. I go to Europe twice a year, London, Amsterdam, Madrid, wherever the meeting is going to be. And I work with their European team and some of the Asian team I work with as well. I go to Hong Kong and some other place in Asia to present the colors for the next year. So I know that those are coming up, and I know that I have to keep researching for the trends all the time. And I think my biggest challenge, and the one that I enjoy more than any other, is the teaching. Because I feel when you've reached a certain point of success in what you've chosen to do, I think it's an obligation to pass that information on to others. You're not going to be here forever. And it's one of the reasons why I love to do the books, because it's a repository of information. I'm a teacher at heart. I was, trained in that area and in psychology and in design. So I put all of the 3 together, and that's my passion. In addition to that, I love meeting the people who share the same passion that I do. They're color lovers. And whether they are professionals, because I have people who are already professionals in the field of color, who I teach in my classes. And I also have people who are novices, but they all have this passion, this interest in color. And they have a talent and an ability. And it may not be as an artist, but inherently, innately, they have a feel and a flair for color. And they need to know where and how to direct that energy, if you speak. And some of it just want it because they love color and they want to learn as much as they can.
Yes.
Or they're in an industry where you might even not think color is necessary, but today it is. In every industry, even in industrial design, product design, everybody knows that color is going to be used in some way, in branding, in packaging.
That's right. And in some facet, and even if it is more of a mundane product line where you're just dealing with metallics, for example, something more industrial, you still have to factor in the sheen, whether you go with a matte or a shiny, which types of metallics. So that does involve, to a degree, color, even when we're just talking about neutrals and things. I'll tell you about, the course that I took from you back maybe about 8 years ago. I was wrapping up fashion design school, and I already had some certifications in the field of personal color analysis and wardrobing and that kind of thing. And I knew I would be shifting focus. And so I took your course because obviously I wanted to learn from you, wanted to learn a little bit about the business of color as well. But I also knew that people from all around the world would attend your class. And I knew that it would be an opportunity for me to truly network and potentially collaborate in the future with other members of the class, because they came from all over the world across multiple industries. Some were very artistic. Some were in, I think, maybe advertising and marketing. There's one gentleman who came over, I'm wanting to say it was from Indonesia, I can't remember, but you had people in that class who came from all over the world and from all walks of professional life. So when's your next workshop?
Well, we're doing it online now, because ever since COVID, we have found that that's an easier way for people to get to us. We have done several classes in the last couple of years since COVID lit up a bit, and we felt we could take chances. Not necessarily chances, but we did it in large classrooms and distance ourselves at the end of the COVID scare. I am going to be doing a class this time, even though I have Korean students who come every year. I'm going to be doing a class for my Korean teacher who took my class several years ago. She came to hear me do a presentation in Seoul, and she opened a color school in Seoul and has been very successful with it. But she always has a contingent of young people in that class. I shouldn't say young people because they're not all young people. Some of them are a little older, who want to come to the United States and meet me directly. So I'm going to be doing a class for them, but we are looking at other dates for other people. And we use some facility, wonderful facility here in Tucson, because I've only been here for 2 years and I'm still in the process of discovery. Yes. And even my Korean students who were here the last time were just blown away by the sunsets and the colors in the sunset and everything that, lies in the desert and around us. And, wow. And they took pictures and just had a ball with it.
Well,
so
I do see it firsthand being here with you these last few days. It's Tucson's beautiful with lots of great landscapes and sunsets, and there's so much natural beauty. Mm-hmm. So for people to get in touch with you on your website, is it morealivewithcolor.com?
Well, there are actually several classes. There's the More Alive with Color, which is the color time training, yes. which is aimed at personal image. We have done that class only online in the last several years because we find, again, it reaches more people. We can reach more people that way. And there's so many hours in the day that I can teach because I'm involved in other projects as well.
It makes sense for you to do these online modules. So what is the best website for people to reach you?
Well, it would be leatrice.com, and you go into the training area because that also has my other class, which is the color design class, the class that you took, that is done primarily for people who want to hone their knowledge in color, want to learn more about the psychology of color, the business of color. Mm-hmm. They may already be involved in a career that involves some color or a company that needs more information, and they bring added value back to the company that they work for. And we are going to be doing a new class, and I am really excited about that. We're just putting the finishing touches on now. This is a class in interior design and color because we have had so many requests for that. And even though we know there's loads of interior design courses that are offered, ours is really aimed more at the psychological impact of color in the interiors, and we are going to be doing that one online as well.
This is a necessary course. I'm happy that you're doing it because as an architectural color consultant in Houston, I regularly receive phone calls from interior designers they're talented, they know what they're doing. They're not confident about color, and they do not want that onus on them of making the final decisions for colors, materials, and finishes. So they'll call me to help them with that. So I think that this would be a great course.
Yeah, and that's precisely why we're doing that class. And there are other things that are not always widely thought about. For example, you think about color temperature. And if you had a chrome table, chrome is very cool, often very modern looking, and you put it on a rug that has beautiful warm tones in it, that chrome table isn't going to stay chrome. It's going to reflect the color that's under it from the carpet that radiates into it.
That is exactly right,
yes. And you were talking about finishes and so on. So it's kind of those things that you really have to stop and think about before you immediately, a designer gets their head set in, chrome and stainless steel and contemporary and so on.
Right.
But what are the other influences?
What?
Exactly.
Right. And we understand color best in a context. You've got to look at all of the elements, the paint color, the countertops, the floor, all of that. This course that you're developing, that you're about to launch, I think is wonderful. And I encourage my listeners who are interested to go and find you there and find out more information.
Well, you mentioned an interesting word, context. That's one of my favorite words.
I'm pretty sure I learned it in one of your classes. I'm pretty sure we talked about it there.
Well, it's my mantra. I mean, in real estate, it's location, location, location. And with color, it's context, context, context.
It very much is. I see it every day in my line of work.
Yes, it's how and where you're using it. So when you see these umbrella statements that are made about you should use green here and blue there and red here, that makes me a little crazy.
Guess what? I concur. It makes me a little crazy too. It really bothers me. It gets under my skin. It's just not true.
Well, it's also very dogmatic.
It is dogmatic.
And you can't be dogmatic about color. So much of it depends on context.
It really does. And it also depends on the intended purpose of the space and the mood you want to set and who you're trying to appeal to, especially in commercial spaces. So you and I could talk for hours about these matters, could we not? So I would like to ask you two final questions here. One of which is, you've been a mentor to me and a friend and an advisor. I've appreciated it. I call you every so often and we chit chat about business. You've walked me through multiple career pivots at this point because I went from personal color to fashion design to architectural color. And my recent move is now into the field of becoming a colorful artist. So you and I have had many of these conversations, which I've valued. I'm imagining that you've had mentors along the way, and I wondered if you could share with us who those mentors have been for you and what they've, just a snippet of what they've taught you. Anything, any insights.
You're listening to Coloring My Way Across the Globe with Lauren Battistini. For more information, check out lfbcolor.com.
I think my biggest mentor all throughout my life, until she unfortunately passed away, was my aunt. And I remember being in a class, a retreat, and women talking about who had been very influential in their lives. And obviously mothers, grandmothers, good friends. And certainly I've had, wonderful friends and wonderful family. But my aunt was the woman who really inspired me in so many ways. She was married at 19, divorced at 29, didn't remarry until she was 65. So she had all of these amazing years where she was on her own. And, when I was a child and being raised, there weren't a lot of women who were living on their own like that. And she wasn't an old spinster lady by any manner of means. She was a very modern lady. She loved to dance. She knew how to dress well. And she was just such a great influence, primarily because she encouraged me in doing those things that really spoke to me, and helped to give me the opportunity by literally paying for some of the things that I wanted to do. And it was her encouragement and her acknowledgement that I could be anything I set my mind to being and doing. She was also a wonderful mentor about food. She walked in the Palm Springs Marathon when she was 90 years old.
Boy, that's impressive. That is almost unheard of.
Yeah, but she was one of those early health food addicts, as people called her.
Yeah, and she was ahead of her time in that respect,
yes.
And in many other respects from the way you have described her.
Yes, and so she was a big mentor. And then there was another woman who, when I first started my career and I was modeling, she was a woman who had one child that she had in her early 50s, which was unheard of. She had the baby, came back to work 3 days later.
Oh, my word.
She was another one of those people who ate the way my aunt did. And years later, I was watching television, and her brother was a well-known diplomat in the State Department, and he was being interviewed in front of Congress. And my husband and I were watching, and I looked at the audience, and I said, I don't believe it. I said, there she is sitting in the audience. Her brother is testifying. She was a woman who might have reached her 100th birthday by that time, sitting straight up with her beautiful blonde hair and blue eyes, looking 40 years younger than her age. And I mean, there was another woman that was a mentor to me when I was in school, and also gave me the confidence of going on and completing my training and completing my work career. So there, I would say those were two very important women. And of course, my own mother, who never said to me, oh no, you can't do that. I mean, any way I wanted to decorate my room, she was very open to that. She said, you can paint it whatever color you want it to be, but when you change your mind and get tired of it, guess who's going to get the paintbrush and buy the paint to make that change?
I am so happy that your mom and your aunt and others have encouraged you along the way. That makes me happy. We forgot to talk about something as I was touring through your house. And thank you for your graciousness, by the way, letting me visit here. You've collected all these beautiful art pieces. And there's one I wanted to talk about. It is that gorgeous piece in your living room. It is an abstract, and I'll post a picture of it for the listeners to see. And it has its base color is peach with underlying tones. And at first glance, to the novice, it looks like just a color slapped up on the canvas. But you look closer and you see all these beautiful layers, and it's nuanced. And from what you tell me, it was painted by a friend of yours who is an ex-nun. So we need the backstory on this one.
Yes, yes,
Please.
quite an amazing story. We had moved to an area in California, Westlake Village, and we had bought a house in an area that was mostly earth tones, and starting to get a little boring looking with everybody using the same kind of avocado greens. And obviously it had been done in the 70s. That's when they first started to build those homes. And being who I am not going to, move into another dirty looking color. We love the community. We love the look of the area. It was very California, and it was stucco, which I've always had a thing for. And so I went to the paint store. I chose a color, brought it home, and I found out that the head of the HOA lived right across the street from me. He was an engineer, but he was the one who approved of the colors. And I thought, oh my goodness. So he came over and I painted a big swatch of it on my garage. He had to approve, and he looked at it and he said, it looks a little bit pinky to me. It's very different than the rest. And I said, oh, it must be the light that's shining on it. Mm-hmm. And he looked at the paint can, and the paint can said something like pink chiffon. I mean, it was a very, very fashiony sounding name.
Pink chiffon.
Yeah, not something that an architectural committee, would necessarily pass on. So I went back to the paint store the next day. Didn't make one change in the color, but I asked him to put it in another paint can. Talk about manipulation. Because I know the power of naming colors. And I knew the color I chose was dirty enough to put on that exterior so that it wouldn't look like a blank, Barbie pink. That wasn't my intention.
It was toned down and muted enough to where it wouldn't look pinky pink.
Exactly. But of course he had no knowledge of color. And so I went back, and they did put it in another paint can, brought it home, and left it out prominently so that when he came back, I painted an even bigger swatch. And he looked at it. He said, oh, I see, claystone. I had renamed it to claystone. And then he saw the nuances that were actually in that color. And he had he not seen the name of the color the day before, he probably wouldn't have said what he said. So the naming is important. I started a trend in that whole community because now people felt like they had permission to use other colors that were so much more attractive than just the dirty colors that they had been using. Now, getting back to the painting, it so happened that the wife of the gentleman I was just referring to, who had to pass on my color, was an artist. And they invited us over as new neighbors to have some hors d'oeuvres. And we walked in the house, and I saw this amazing abstract painting, the one that's hanging in my living room now. And I said to my husband, look at this, look at the use of color, look at the layering, look at the nuances, the very words that you used, the way she so adapted the color. And it so fits into this stucco house. And I said to my husband, we're in like Flynn. If the wife has anything to do with what's going to happen in this community, she's going to love the fact that I'm, using this new color on the house. Well, we got to be good friends. And I convinced her that I needed to buy that painting from her. And she, no, I don't want to give up that painting. She said, Sister Corita Kent had been her mentor. And I thought, that's very interesting. Sister Corita Kent. I said, how did you know Corita Kent? I mean, she was well known in California. She was at Marymount, and she was a well-known nun who also painted abstract, which was very, very unusual. And my neighbor was trained by her and idolized her. And I said, how did you know her? She said, well, I was a nun in the convent. She said, I entered when I was 19. When I was 39, I decided that I really wanted to have a family. And I went to the Mother Superior and I talked to her about it. And the Mother Superior knew that if I had this need, that I needed to be in the real world. She said, and it also enabled me to paint much more.
Yes.
And she said, and I met this marvelous man who, by the way, to add to the story, had been sequestered in a garret in Amsterdam at the same time that Anne Frank was. He was Jewish, and his neighbors kept him secretly hidden. She had been sequestered in a convent.
Yes.
He had been sequestered in a garret, and they found each other and got married and had a family right away. They were an amazing couple, and we kept our friendship up for many years after that. And that painting is a great reminder of her beautiful work.
I think that's a fantastic story, and I did really notice that piece of art as soon as I walked into your living room. And your home is filled with multiple pieces of art. You are a true art collector, but that piece really stood out. And I do find it interesting because as we took a tour of your house, you had a story for almost every piece, and I was fascinated by that. And it speaks to how people have an attachment to color and art. It does something for us. Some people think art is just frivolous or unnecessary, but again, as I merge into this art career here, I find that art is anything but frivolous and impractical. I think it's essential to life.
Well, Lauren, I think it's wonderful that you are embarking. You have been, doing your painting for a while. You're still learning, and you're still experimenting, but your work is quite remarkable, I have to say.
That's very kind of you.
Yes.
I accept the compliment
Yes.
with a lot of gratitude. Thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
Yes. Well, and the other point that I wanted to make is that your curiosity about color never ends. And I think that's part of what makes you, enhances the gift that you already have. And that has led you down the path to following your heart about what you really want to do. And I think that's admirable of listening to your own heart and following the talents that you have and not being fearful of putting it out there. There are people that have talent. I'm sure there are people that are going to be listening to this podcast, but they're concerned about putting it out there for fear of criticism.
Yes.
And I say to them, don't be afraid of the criticism. This is an example of who you are, the work that you can do. You do it for your own enjoyment. There are other people out there who are going to enjoy it.
And I appreciate you bringing that point to light, because I find that through this podcast and through all of my social media, not only am I chronicling my travels, I'm chronicling my language learning, but I'm also chronicling the art in this art journey I'm on, because I'm hoping that it will inspire and encourage other people to set aside fear, set aside ego, concern about what others might think, to really pursue their passions and their dreams. Mm-hmm. So let's talk color metaphorically in closing. I ask all of my guests this: what does living a colorful life look like to you? And secondly, how are you living colorfully?
What does color mean to me in my life? I think that the most important thing is that it's made me so aware of the world around me. It is impossible for me to be anywhere in the world, whether it be the shopping center in the neighborhood,
the grocery store,
or the grocery store, right? Or any other place. I mean, taking my dog for a walk around my house. And looking at the colors that are in the sky, that are what is there a blooming cacti? What color is that? What about the cars that are whizzing by on the highway? Keeping your eyes open to everything that you see. And I make this statement primarily because it does bother me when I see, especially young people, it's not only young people, so attached to their phones. Mm. And even if they're out someplace, or walking around a museum and having their attention focused on the phone instead of absorbing what is in the world around them. And that bothers me for the future. I think about young people who have their noses so buried in the phone.
Yes.
That they fail to realize that there is magic around them that they need to open their eyes to. Now, that's not to say that there isn't color on the phone. There's certainly lots of that.
Yes.
But to expand your horizons and not to become so geared to using mechanical means that you stop appreciating what is in the world around you. No matter where you are in the world, there is something to look at that's colorful, and it doesn't have to be brilliant color. We use the word nuance. That's a very, very important word. Even if it's a gray day in a gray city. I mean, I used to live near Seattle. I know all about that. still there are wonderful lights that, that you see, or the sky will turn a different color. Look at the nuances within that and gather that all in. And it gives you a sense of awareness and a sense of enjoyment, no matter how dark the color may be, or how non-colorful. Open up your mind to it. Look at the possibilities. How can you use that color? Personalize it. I think that's the most important thing, to look forward to the future. Keep your eyes open to the color that's around you.
That's a very good answer. And so this is how you live your life colorfully.
Yes.
I like that. Lee, thank you so much for giving generously of your time, for having this visit with me. My listeners are going to be so pleased with this, and I'm just grateful that you're here as my first guest for my debut episode and of Coloring My Way Across the Globe. And you were the first person I thought of to be my debut guest.
Well, it's my pleasure. And thank you, Lauren, for staying in touch with me over the years. I think one of the biggest things a teacher mourns is the fact that you get very close to the people who take your programs. You get to know them. And then, as people will do, they will move on to the next portion of their life, to new classes, new things. But it's those special students who come to you. And from day one that they're going to remain close to you. They're going to let you know what their lives are like. Yeah. You can reach out to them. They can reach out to you. And you are certainly one of those people.
Well, Lee, I just keep boomeranging back into your life.
Keep on.
And you always are welcome to boomerang back into my life. So I appreciate your time. And for my listeners, definitely visit Lee's website, especially those of you who are interested in color and expanding your knowledge base. And I will include a link to her website in the comments section and in the description section of the podcast episode. And until next time, everybody, live colorfully and enjoy your day. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Coloring My Way Across the Globe. I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation, and we would love to stay connected with you throughout the week. The best way to connect is by subscribing to our newsletter at www.lfbcolor.com. That's www.L as in Lauren, F as in Frank, B as in boy, color, COLOR.com. Also, you may find us on Instagram using the same handle, LFBcolor, for the latest stories, podcast guest profiles, travel photography, language learning diaries, and my own colorful art. Hope to see you there, friends. Thank you again.